Journey to the Western Vernacular, Chapter 27. The clever stealing of the purple gold bell in Qilin Mountain. After walking for a few days, Tang Seng and his disciples came to Zhuzi Kingdom. After Tang Seng took his disciples to stay at the post house, seeing that it was still early, he went to pay the customs alone. But Sun Wukong couldn't stay idle. He asked Sha Monk to prepare meals in the post house while he and Bajie went shopping. They came to the drum tower on West Street and saw a large group of people gathered downstairs. Bajie was afraid of causing trouble and refused to go any further. Wukong liked to watch the excitement by nature, so he asked Bajie to wait for him and got into the crowd to watch. I saw an imperial notice hanging on the wall, saying that the king was seriously ill and was about to die. If anyone could cure him, the king would give half of the country to him. Wukong likes to meddle in other people's business, so he recited a spell and blew a breath of fairy air. Immediately, a whirlwind blew up, making people unable to open their eyes. He used the invisibility method to step forward and reveal the emperor's list. Wukong came to Bajie's side and saw that Bajie's mouth was pressed against the wall, as if he was asleep. He rolled up the emperor's list, quietly stuffed it into Bajie's arms, turned around and went back to the inn, humming a song. After the strong wind passed, the eunuchs and officers and soldiers guarding Huangbang saw that Huangbang was missing. They searched everywhere and found him in Bajie's arms, so they took him to treat the king. Bajie knew that Wukong was playing a trick on him, so he said to the officers and soldiers, "My senior brother revealed this list. Come on, I will lead you to find him." When Wukong was invited to the palace, the king stayed with Tang Monk before he left. When the king saw Wukong, he was very frightened and did not dare to let him cure his illness. Wukong pulled out 3 vellus hairs and turned them into 3 silk threads, and asked the eunuch to tie the silk threads to the king's wrist, saying that this was called hanging silk, to diagnose the pulse. Wukong held the thread and said through the curtain, "The disease caused by the Holy Land is caused by long-term fear and excessive longing. It is called two-bird syndrome." The king nodded and asked Wukong to give him a prescription to cure the disease. Wukong asked the imperial doctor to prepare 3 kilograms of each of the 808 kinds of medicinal materials, plus the tools for making medicine, and sent them to the post house and handed them over to Bajie and Sha Seng. By the time Wukong returned to the post house, all the medicinal materials had been delivered. In the evening, Bajie and Sha Seng took out some of the 808 kinds of medicinal materials, crushed them and mixed them thoroughly to make 3 pills, and put them into small boxes. It turned out that the reason why he wanted so many medicinal materials was because he was afraid that the imperial physician in the palace would guess his prescription. The next day, 3 pills were delivered to the palace. The king recovered immediately after taking them. When he saw Tang Monk, he knelt down and kowtowed, and sent someone to invite brother Wukong. The 3 brothers entered the palace happily, and the king quickly stood up to greet them, and asked people to prepare a vegetarian banquet at Guanglu Temple to thank Tang Monk and his apprentice for their kindness in curing the disease. During the meal, Wukong asked the king, "My old grandson knows that your majesty is lovesick. I wonder what's on your mind." The king looked up to the sky and sighed, and told Wukong, 3 years ago, the monster Saitesui of Zizi Cave in Qilin Mountain met the king's golden child. The empress of the holy palace was as beautiful as a fairy, so she made trouble and snatched her away, so she got this love sickness. After hearing this, Wukong said, "King, don't worry. I, the old grandson, will subdue the monsters and bring the queen back." The king quickly knelt down to thank him and told Wukong that Saitesui would come several times a year, and each time he would capture 2 palace maids to serve his empress. In order to prevent monsters from hurting people, the king also ordered people to build a monster-avoiding tower. The king responded to Wukong's request and took them to the demon-avoiding tower. This demon-avoiding building is built underground, with 9 main halls built inside, and the entrance is covered with stone slabs. As he was talking, he suddenly saw dust flying and strong winds blowing in the south. All civil and military officials screamed, "The monster is coming." They hugged the king and Tang Monk and climbed into the underground monster-avoiding tower. Bajie and Sha Seng also wanted to hide in, but were held back by Wukong. At this time, a monster jumped out of the sky, holding a spear in his hand. Wukong asked Bajie and Sha Seng to guard the entrance of the cave, and he jumped into the air. After asking, he found out that the monster was just Saitesui's pioneer officer. Within a few rounds, the monster's gun was broken into pieces by Wukong. The monster escaped. Wukong invited the king and the civil and military officials out of the monster-avoiding building and told them what had happened. All the officials in the court admired Wukong's ability. Wukong asked the king for a personal belongings of the Golden Saint Empress as a token, and was ready to go to Qilin Mountain to rescue the Empress immediately. The king took out a pair of golden treasure strings from his sleeves and gave them to Wukong. Wukong soon came to Qilin Mountain and saw a little demon running quickly, carrying a document on his back and beating a gong. Wukong transformed into a little Taoist priest and stepped forward to greet him. He asked him where he was going to deliver the official document. The little demon said that he was going to the country of Noble and Purple to declare war. Wukong also found out from the little demon that Saitai Sui has 3 golden bells, which can set off fire, smoke, and sand, respectively. If you touch them, you will die. Wukong beat the little demon to death with a stick, and found a tooth tag from his body. When he saw that it read, "The confidant of the elementary school comes and goes," he walked towards the Hechi cave like he was coming and going. Wukong walked into the cave with great swagger. When he walked up to the monster, he didn't even salute, but just knocked on the gong. The monster grabbed him and asked him what was wrong. He threw the gong on the ground and said that he had been beaten in the Juzi kingdom, and that they were about to come to fight. The monster comforted him and asked him to tell the Golden Saint Empress the news. Wukong was very happy and hurriedly ran to the harem. When Wukong came to the harem, he saw several beauties transformed from foxes and deers standing on both sides. In the middle sat the Empress, holding her chin in her hands, with tears in her eyes. Wukong stepped forward and saluted, saying that he had just returned from the Imperial Kingdom and had something to tell her. After hearing this, the Empress immediately asked the beauties on both sides to retreat. Wukong closed the door, wiped his face, revealed his true form, and told what happened. Then he took out the golden string, held it in both hands, and said, "If you don't believe it, please see what this is." When the Empress saw it, she quickly kneeled down and kowtowed. Wukong asked where the 3 golden bells of the monster were placed. The queen said that the monster hung on his waist and never left his body. After the two of them discussed how to steal the golden bell, Wukong began to come and go again. He opened the palace door and called in the 2 maids. The Empress followed the plan and said, "Everything comes and goes. Call your king here quickly. I have something to tell him." Wukong invited the monster over. The Empress smiled brightly and used her hands to help the monster. The monster was so frightened that he even backed away, saying he didn't dare. It turned out that when the Empress was snatched away by monsters, Jiang Zhenren dressed her in a colorful fairy dress, which made her body covered with poisonous thorns, so monsters did not dare to touch her. The Empress had already prepared a banquet, saying that she wanted to have a drink with the monsters, and asked the 2 banshees to retreat, leaving only a small maid in the room to serve wine and food. How could the monster think that this maid turned out to be Sun Wukong? When Wukong was pouring wine for the monster, he plucked out a handful of vellus hairs, chanted a spell, and turned them into countless lice, fleas, and bed bugs, and threw them on the monster's body. The monster was bitten and itched extremely. He picked at this and scratched at that with both hands. The Empress persuaded him to take off his clothes and help him catch lice. The monster immediately took off his clothes and saw that there were lice on every piece of clothing, as densely packed as ants moving. The monster had no choice but to take off his clothes, and sure enough, 3 golden bells were revealed, which were also covered with lice. Just listen to the little maid shouting, "Oh, your majesty, please untie Jinling quickly and let me catch it for you." The monster was so shy and flustered that he didn't care about distinguishing the true from the false. He untied the 3 golden bells and handed them over. The fake maid saw that the monster was busy catching lice, so she hid the golden bells, plucked out a vellus hair and turned it into 3 fake golden bells, held it in front of a lamp to catch lice, and finally took back the vellus hairs that turned into lice, and turned the fake golden bells into 3. The bell was handed to the Demon King. The monster got dressed and went to the table to get the golden bell. The queen deliberately asked, "What is the use of hanging it on my waist all day long?" So the monster talked about the power of the 3 golden bells. The Empress said, "In this case, you should leave it to me for safekeeping. Wouldn't that be better?" The monster handed the golden bell to the Empress and watched her lock it in the box. After Wukong succeeded, he recited the mantra, used an invisibility method, and left the Hechi cave. He stood on a high place in front of the cave and shouted loudly, "Sai Tesui, hand over the golden saint queen." The monster was shocked after hearing this. Busy. "Get the little monsters out of the cave." He held a Xuanhua axe and shouted, "What's your name? How dare you come here to seek death?" The two sides fought with weapons for about 50 rounds. The monster was exhausted and made an excuse, saying that he wanted to go back to the cave for breakfast and to get the golden bell. Wukong understood in his heart and deliberately put away his stick and asked him to go back. He stood in front of the cave and laughed. The monster asked the golden saint to take out the golden bell. As the empress opened the lock, she wondered if Wukong could escape with his life. In fact, neither she nor the monster knew that these 3 golden bells were all fake. The monster jumped out of the hole again with the golden bell and shouted to Wukong, "Sun Wukong, look at my treasure." The monster shook the first bell, but no fire came out. It shook the second bell, but no fire came out. There was smoke. When I rang the third bell, there was no quicksand coming out, and I immediately panicked and was at a loss what to do. Wukong smiled and said, "Let's look at my baby." Wukong untied the 3 real golden bells from his waist and shook them together. For a moment, fire, green smoke, and yellow sand spurted out at the same time, shaking the sky and the earth. The Saitai Sui was so frightened that he wanted to run for his life, but he ran away again, headless. At this moment, Guanyin flew up on auspicious clouds and said to Wukong, "Don't burn it to death, it is my golden horse." Guanyin dipped a willow branch into some nectar in the pure bottle and sprinkled it. The smoke immediately disappeared. The flames, green smoke, and yellow sand all disappeared, and the monster also revealed its true form. The Bodhisattva found that the 3 golden bells under the Jinmo's neck were not there, so he asked Wukong to take them back. Then he mounted the Jinmao and flew away on the clouds. It turns out that the golden retriever sneaked into the mortal world to cause trouble while the shepherd boy was napping. Wukong broke into the hole, killed all the little demons, and rescued the Golden Saint Palace Empress. Wukong found some soft grass and tied it into a grass dragon. He asked the queen to ride on it with her eyes closed, and then chanted the incantation and cast the spell. The empress flew into the clouds and mist, and flew to the palace. Half an hour later, they arrived at the palace. The empress opened her eyes and saw the grass dragon, and she and Wukong boarded the golden palace. When the king saw it, he hurriedly got off the dragon chair to help the queen. Unexpectedly, when he touched the queen's hand, the king screamed in pain. At this time, the cry of the crane was heard in the air. It turned out to be Zenrin Jiang riding on the cloud and riding the crane. Master Jiang came to the empress, stretched out his hand, and the colorful fairy clothes on the empress immediately turned into an old brown clothes and fell to the ground. It turns out that when Master Jiang saw his empress being snatched away by a monster, he was afraid that she would be insulted, so he turned this old brown dress into a colorful fairy dress for her to wear. When the monster touched her, it was as if she had been stabbed by a poisonous thorn. After Master Jiang left, Tang Seng and his disciples changed Guan Wen and hurried on their way. Seeing that he could not keep him, the king had to prepare a dragon chariot and asked Tang Monk and his apprentices to sit on the chariot. He, his empress, and all the civil and military officials followed behind the chariot and sent him out of the imperial city on foot. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.